Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Juch Nam, Executive Director of AMCHAM Korea. Welcome to our 31st webinar hosted by our Energy and Environment Committee. We have launched this new online platform in April of 2020 in response to COVID-19 and the new era of social distancing. To kick off today's special webinar, I am delighted to share with you on the digitalization of energy along with the corresponding application and challenges. This webinar was specially prepared by Susan G. of Baker Hughes, our Energy and Environment Committee co-chair. Currently at Baker Hughes as the Marketing Key Account Leader, she plans to provide everyone the opportunity to hear from cross-industry speakers on how digital will impact the energy industry. We are also privileged to have Dr. Soonmin Bae from KT, Mr. Abhik Chatterjee of Boston Consulting Group, and Mr. Ahmed Ibrahim from Baker Hughes. Abhik Chatterjee, Managing Director at the Boston Consulting Group, has over 15 years of experience in private and public companies across Asia, the US, and Europe. He is currently a core member of the firm's Center for Digital in Oil and Gas. He will focus his experiences on challenges and approaches to deploying digital in the energy industry. Dr. Soonmin Bae, Senior VP at the KT Institute of Convergence Technology, is an expert on computational photography and artificial intelligence. She is helping KT's transformation to a digital platform company with focus on AI, big data, and cloud computing businesses. She will share her visions on views on smart energy for Korea's. Our third panelist, Ahmed Ibrahim, Vice President of the BHC3 Digital Business in APAC, is focused on partnering with oil and gas companies in the region on digital transformation in a variety of segments, including drilling, subsea systems, turbo machinery, and downstream solutions. Based on his expertise in digital, he will share his insights and case studies on AI applications in the oil and gas and energy sectors. We look forward to your active participation in using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. My name is Susan G. I'm your co-chair of the Energy and Environment Committee, and I'm very pleased that we're able to meet again, albeit in this webinar format. To proceed with the introduction, I'd like to start our session today with Abhik Chatterjee's presentation regarding digital in the energy industry. So Abhik, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Susan. Let me quickly share my screen. A very good morning and good afternoon to all of you. Sincere privilege from my side to be part of this elite session today. And thanks to AMCHAM and the entire association for giving me the opportunity. My name is Abhik Chatterjee. I am a managing director with Boston Consulting Group, based out of India. I serve a lot of oil and gas clients across Asia Pacific. Let me start with overall how the landscape has been for the past 12 months and what a year it has been. Our industry, specifically energy at large, has been one that has really come under huge amount of pressure. COVID-19 happened to intensify the pressure to the next level, but with multiple elements like, for example, the entire demand shocks, the price of crude, other upside and downside factors that you see, the entire industry has been shaken. Now, what that has allowed us to do is it has really made us extremely cognizant of two factors. One is clearly on the cost side, and secondly on the asset side. Now, most of the companies, if I look at the larger companies from our West or even in Asia Pacific, if I look at the top 5 global oil majors, they took out over $35 billion in terms of capex cuts. That was some of the initial reactions that were taken. In addition to it, widespread rejig of their asset portfolio happened. One additional element was also slowly came into the radar, which was that around digital. Today's session is slightly focused on that topic of digital. And when we, BCG, look at digital, especially for our oil and gas companies, the theme that we define or arrive at is what we call as every oil and gas company or every energy company of the future, which includes oil and gas, renewables, power, etc., is going to be bionic. We use the term bionic because it drives outcomes in the form of excellence in operations, next level of what we would call as extremely frictionless B2C experience for our retail clients, be it at home or industrial, and ultimately being able to use technology and digital for really driving the next form of offerings and services, a lot of which we are facing as an industry as a clear threat from many of the other technology and partner players. Anchored around the outcomes are clearly two large enablers. One is the data and digital platforms, which is the whole new way of how you will string together legacy technology as well as bring in some of the most cutting edge pieces around artificial intelligence, machine learning, quantum compute. You name a high tech technology, there is definitely room and space for that in the energy space. And last, but really one of the most critical areas for us has been how do we really augment human performance ways of working in our industry, which typically has been very, very traditional. Uh, if you look at oil and gas and compare them against some of the biggest, what we would say, digital movers in the market, honestly, we are not one of the fastest. We are not an early adopter. But uh, as an industry, we are getting into a position what we call as a last mover advantage, which is we may not have the most sophisticated systems or backend like that of some of the most leading banks or some of the most cutting edge telecom or technology companies. But then our focus on asset operations, our focus on the entire backend as well as the middle office becomes extremely critical for us. And hence, bionic organizations from an energy perspective are going to be the future, which will really put together leading outcomes, a whole new set of data and technologies, and obviously tying together the entire new ways of working. Just to move on, very recently, and this was in July 2020, that we commissioned what we called as our digital strategy refresh, wherein we looked at over 830 organizations across the world. Approximately 15% of them are from the energy sector, which is a big number. We interviewed a whole lot of their CEOs, CFOs, head of technology, etc. And a few startling facts emerged. Number one, only 30%, which is less than a third, of the companies who have embarked on digital have really succeeded. And when I talk about real success, I am talking about scaled value that is written to my top line or bottom line. I am talking about evolved new ways of working, significant change in productivity, safety, and critical parameters that we in the energy companies believe that is so important. But then if I look at the 30% who are successful, what makes them succeed? We linked them and we understood them in four patterns. And what was most interesting is the success factors did not start immediately with technology. So it was not, which is often the view that if you're talking digital, it's about getting a tool right, it's about getting a pilot right. So it was really not about technology. So let me bring out a few top key points. For the companies who really made it big and succeeded, they brought in really strong CEO and leadership engagement, which means digital was driven as a CEO mandate top down. Uh, Business was also incentivized. When I say business in energy, assets really rule. So digital was driven by the assets. A chief digital officer or head of digital, whichever name you would say, was clearly put in place to drive it, but assets were in complete control to take digital ahead. A small point, was how do you really enable and energize the teams to think of digital and drive digital? Because today, my business teams or my on-ground engineers do not think of digital as their prime outcome. For them, it is rightly around cost, volume, throughput, quality, safety. So the point was, how do you make digital very relevant to? The second key element was, how do you link it to outcomes? Successful digital leaders have put a very clear control tower mechanism which tracks like an eagle X number of projects, Y million dollars on the line, Z timeline, and then how do you execute that? It's a very, very ruthless and rigorous assessment, execution, and monitoring of a funnel that is done with laser sharp focus. And the last 2 points, yet very important, which is how do you construct this complex technology puzzle and data puzzle? So, do you need to really change everything that you have today? Perhaps not. Can you find out sharp ways wherein we can really sweat the technology asset that you have? Most companies in APAC have a mix of reasonable amount of what I would say advanced process controls or asset equipment. Many leaders are bringing in innovation. So how do we blend in all of that? How do you really use the power of the partner ecosystem to really take the next steps? A big point of that is around technology and data platform. And lastly, but very, very importantly, which is you can definitely do a great pilot, start with a great project. But if for leaders who have driven digital for the last 10 plus years, so we talk of the Shells of the world, the BP, Chevrons, etc. APAC also has a number of good examples coming up, by the way. There, a key difference has been how have we really embedded digital culture and mindset within the people? Are people really loving the fact that this is going to be a new wave and form of change? Or is this just another burden that the management is putting on me because this is something that we want to do? So largely, these are the real differences that make laggards and what makes leaders what they are. Obviously, there are a lot of examples and use cases that sit below it, ranging from the space of asset operations optimization, excellence in safety through mobility and apps, obviously the entire cloud-based journey that Energy is underway. But I really wanted to share with you that what does it take for energy companies to excel in digital? And then we'll see with some of our other panel speakers as well, talk about specific examples as well as interventions on how this has been brought to life. With that, I'll take a pause and hand it back to you, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abhik, for your very insightful presentation. We'll be continuing to take any Q&A through the chat window, so please feel free to enter your questions through that. So I would like to open the floor now to Ahmed Ibrahim's presentation regarding case studies in oil and gas.
Great, thank you. So I think Abhik's presentation was a really good platform for me to build on. It's really the backdrop description of what's happening in our industry today. And my name is Ahmed Ibrahim, and I lead the Baker Hughes C3 joint venture in Asia Pacific, and I'm based in Perth, Australia. And most people who do digital in the oil and gas industry come from one or the other way. They either come from the hardcore software side or artificial intelligence, or they come from the oil and gas engineering side. I come from the latter. So I've been in the industry for more than 22 years now. And I've done very different things. I've had quite a unique career of probably being exposed to different parts of our industry, both upstream and downstream. So what I wanted to cover today is really just an introduction of why we did the alliance with C3 and created this Baker Hughes C3 alliance with Microsoft, and describe some of the key aspects of success and the key elements and ingredients of success that we've seen over the last 5 or so years, that as digital become more of a more of an absolute need as opposed to a want that we were doing 3 or 4 years ago. It's starting to become more and more important to get some of these things right. So this industry is not a stranger to cycles. We've seen oil and gas crashing. We've seen booms and bust cycles relatively regularly with, every 20 so years, if you've had a career in oil and gas, you probably have been through 1 or 2 of those. The difference this time is that it's not just cyclical, it's also structural. So as we go through energy transition, most analysts out there, including the IEA, will tell you that the 110 million barrels per day would probably be the peak oil point in our industry. And we will not be producing any more than that. What will happen at that point is the industry will plateau. And as this plateau is happening, more and more growth is being fed through renewable and gas as the transition fuel between fossil fuels and into renewables and more sustainable forms of energy. So as you think about this, what's happening is a significant component of our upstream industry is being displaced. A lot of cities and a lot of countries have gone into lockdown over the last year or so, and that translates into less road fuel, into definitely less jet fuel. So you need a lot more flexibility in how you operate refineries in the downstream segment as well. So the industry is seeing something that it hasn't seen before, and it's having to deal with it with very innovative ways. And today I'll probably share with you some of these examples of how we brought some of this into oil and gas, both upstream, which is relatively minimal in Korea, and downstream, which is a lot more common in the Korean market. So I'm going to probably introduce our business through this alliance. And the reason this is very important is I come from the GE side of the Baker Hughes legacy, and what I would say is over the last 6 or so years, we've tried. I think the strategy was right. We tried to do something that was fundamentally we wanted to build it on our own, and I feel like we've learned the lesson very quickly that in digital, if you're a manufacturer of hardware products, you typically see software as something that is relatively easy to build, that is very easy to fail fast and just do something different. What you realize very quickly is that for you to do something at scale, it requires billions and billions of dollars and infrastructure work that you don't necessarily need to build, because there are players out there that have built some of these components that you can just focus on what you are good at and just scale it from there. So last year, we announced an alliance with Baker Hughes C3 with a Silicon Valley company founded by Tom Siebel, the gentleman that you see here on the left-hand side. He's no stranger to enterprise software. He's co-founder of Oracle, built Siebel Systems, so the first CRM system in the world. So he knew a thing or two about these big scalable software solutions. And we were just strong in oil and gas. We understood software in an OT, in an operation technology kind of fashion, but we didn't really understand what does it take to build an application at scale for an AI with an AI engine under it. And then the third most recent addition to the alliance is Microsoft with their Microsoft Azure, and obviously everybody in the room would probably be very familiar with that capability and the scale of deployment pretty much everywhere around the world. We see that culmination of these capabilities as quite enabling to a lot of what we're trying to do. And what is it that we're trying to do? Is deploy artificial intelligence around the oil and gas value chain. And as someone who comes from that background, I can tell you for a fact that the oil and gas industry is fundamentally an industry that just seeks to manage risk, right? Where do we drill wells? This comes at a typical petrophysical success rate of around 10 to 20. The good ones get it up to 30%. So you know that you've got oil somewhere here. You drill well, and in 3 out of the 10 wells, you get oil or hydrocarbons, and then the rest you don't. You get a bust or what we call a duster, right? And how do you do maintenance on a big mission critical asset? We do it by building a lot of safety margins, and a lot of all the uncertainties of what we don't know gets managed by adding safety margins into what we do. How fast should you be drilling these wells? How quickly should you be producing out of these wells? How much can you add out of this particular process in a CDU to give no process giveaway? So you're not really adding spec to what the customers are expecting on the browser, right? So our industry is really all about getting something out of a rock, a hydrocarbon out of a rock that is 4 to 5 kilometers under the surface of the planet, put it in a barrel, take it into a refinery, typically in Korea, Japan, North Asia is quite strong in this particular part of the world, to turn it into valuable hydrocarbons. And as you see this value chain transition from the rock all the way to the pump where you fill up your car, all of these processes are just fraught with risk. And the way we manage risk in engineering is we add safety margins. So spares is risk. Additional backup equipment is risk. All of these things that in our industry, we use positive language to describe, but fundamentally in the Japanese TPM system, they would be considered waste. So what AI is actually trying to do is find these pools of waste, pools of inefficiencies, pools of uncertainties that are being managed with redundancies, with extra cost, and taking them out of our business value chain. That's fundamentally what AI role is doing to make the business more certain. And as it becomes more certain, it becomes less costly. And the case study that I want to share with you today, and I'm just going to run through this because it's quite intriguing, but it's also very valuable. And I just want to show you the scale of the team that was put on by Shell and what they did within, a year or so, probably April 2019, so a year and a half now, almost 2 years of deploying artificial intelligence in their business. They started with this idea of preempting failure and maintenance across their asset, and this is not particularly unique to Shell. I think a lot of companies have done it, but most of the companies that we work with have done it on a pilot scale to what I would consider to be small scale, POC scale. So they would deploy it on 1, 2, 10, 20, 100 machines. What Shell did was they deployed this really smart algorithm that looks at around 642,000 assets across their asset pool in different asset categories to preempt the failures of these key mission critical assets. So these are assets that if they go down, a whole oil platform goes down, or a whole CDU goes down, or a whole big process unit goes down. So something significant to the business. This is not just like every valve and every pump. And they deployed this, and the final result of it was, and this was within 2 weeks, they've started finding all these failures that would have shut down these machines, and actually got highlighted in the investors presentation with the CEO 2 quarters ago, 3 quarters ago, by the business, and they've decided that this is something that they're going to scale across their portfolio. Another example that they've used is in AI in their business is how do you align your net goal zero, which is an HSE objective for the business, to some of these use cases. They're now using machine vision in Shell retail stations, where if somebody gets on their phone while they're filling the browser, then the system will alarm and it will trip, and that pump will just get shut down. So this is just another example of how they've applied some of these artificial intelligence simple ideas, and it's not necessarily something people think, artificial intelligence necessarily means robots. It could mean something as simple as that just contributes incrementally to a big goal that they have, which is the net zero objective. In November 2020, which is the latest update that we have from them, is they've now got 28 trained developers, 20 active developers, and 6 active projects. And a project is essentially a scalability project. So they're just putting the algorithms on more and more assets as opposed to a new idea or a new concept. So with that small team of 28 people, what they've managed to do is they've delivered around 600 million euros worth of EBITDA to the business on recurring annual benefit throughout their business value chain. And most of it was driven by either increased reliability or increased availability of mission critical assets. And this is the beauty of digital, and this is why digital becomes very, very sexy for a lot of CEOs and boards out there. is that it's the rule of large numbers. If you improve by 1%, you know, a $50 billion business, you're improving $500 million. So it scales relatively quickly if you apply it at scale. With that, I'll pause here, and hopefully we'll have a bunch of good questions in the Q&A, but looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. It's always good to see how the type of theory and AI can really work in a real environment. Next, I'd like to open the floor back to our third speaker for today. Hopefully our IT issues are resolved with Dr. Soonmin Bae from KT.
Hello, everyone. Let me introduce KT Energy Business Cases. KT is one of the companies leading energy digital transformation in Korea. As you all know, we are facing digital transformation in the fourth industrial revolutionary era. KT is focusing on AI, big data, and cloud businesses. COVID has been accelerating digital transformation massively. Korea also has experienced a large change and innovation recently. In particular, energy sector needs digital transformation due to dynamic changes. KT views DX in the energy domain in terms of grid edge, decentralization, electrification, and digitalization. KT-MEG, which stands for Micro Energy Grid in the Smart Energy Solution by KT. We focus on renewable energy, photovoltaic generation, energy transaction for electric vehicles, and consumption via energy management system. KT's eBrain targets energy AI. It consists of diagnosis, prediction, and optimized control. Korean traditional buildings and facilities hire experts to be in charge of energy management. KT eBrain finds customers' patterns and provides customized services. KT eBrain automatically updates model by analyzing data history. This model update is possible thanks to predictive model capability of KT. Lastly, KT's eBrain apply reinforcement learning framework to optimize building energy control. We call this robo-operator. KT itself has over 250 local branches. As we apply eBrain-based EMS to around 200 offices, energy consumption is reduced by 10%. KT is applying EMS around 10,000 sites. KT is the #1 supplier in the energy storage system in Korea. Using ESS, photovoltaic generation profit could be 58% increased. KT ESS is serving around 1,000 sites. Thank you for watching. This video is a little too much fancy, but it must to give you a sense of KT's eagerness and willingness for energy business. And thank you for watching.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bae. We really appreciated that introduction, and I hope during the panel discussion we might be able to dive a little bit deeper into the topics that you mentioned. So now I'd like to sort of move to the second part of our discussion today, where we can have all of our panelists in a sort of panel discussion. So I'd actually like to give the first question back to Dr. Bae. This is a question about energy and artificial intelligence. KT is transitioning from a telecommunications company to a digital platform company by investing heavily in AI and robotics. Where do you think KT will play a role in supporting digital transformation of the energy industry?
So KT already has invested quite a lot of money and resources in energy domain, although it's not gas and oil, but it's mainly photovoltaic generation and energy management system, and also energy trade as well. Since KT actually has experts in building automation system, since KT has CCTV as well, so KT has an gate control. So KT is interested in the integrated all system into one total management system. So I think, yeah, that's how KT is driving its energy domain businesses.
See. I'd like to maybe ask the second question to Abhik at BCG, and that's how would you compare the adoption of digital in the energy industry with other industries? What are some of the key benefits of digital transformation that the energy industry as a whole has yet to tap into?
Sure. So see, energy as it compares to, if you compare it to the overall industry set, energy would come, unfortunately, in the last quadrant in terms of digital push. And I don't think that is something bad for us to feel. I mean, our industry is different, our challenges are different. It also throws different forms of advantages. And what has also happened is over the past, if you reflect back on the past decade, large energy players from the West have actually made significant strides. APAC in many cases has also been a beacon for change. So I know of, for example, large LNG operators or upstream players in Australia who have driven some of the most advanced forms of analytics on the asset operation side, to, for example, a lot of retail players across Southeast Asia as well as Hong Kong, who have really taken the entire, what we would say, business model innovation to the next level. Now, coming back to the second part of your question, which is which areas can we do better on? I think a good part of our energy focus, and logically so, has been on the asset and operation side. That's where a large chunk of our money is spent. I think if I reflect on APAC, we are still at a stage wherein we have done interesting pilots. We would have toyed with technology at some specific sites, but is digital such a serious bottom line P&L item that is writing significant $1 million or billions of dollars for the head of operations or the VP of manufacturing? I think we are a step away from that. And part of it is how we have asset driving that. A couple of additional areas that I believe digital would be very, very disruptive for us is one is in the space of health and safety. We are a business wherein license to operate and the entire safety index and zero harm is very high. Across APAC, I would say there is a very wavering bar of certain geographies being very high, many other geographies not being there. I think digital has a role to play there. And lastly, with the entire COVID impact of hybrid work that has set in, there is an element of employee and what I would say operator experience. The entire way that the company would engage with the employee or with its business partners. I think digital has a whole role to play there, not only beyond what I would say getting a Zoom or a Teams call in place, but something that I would call as more overall wellness for the employee, because you are not being able to meet him or her. I have started to, I yesterday traveled to conduct a workshop for my client in person, and believe me, what a joy it was to at least do a fist bump to a few of my friends versus sitting just right across and talking on a Zoom call. So I think whilst digital is, and that's a place wherein I think those two areas wherein digital can be a big game changer for us, beyond obviously the tangible dollar items that we naturally focus on.
Great, thank you. And I think my third question for this topic is goes to Ahmed, and I'd like to ask you, what is the importance of having strategic relationships as one embarks on a digital transformation roadmap as an energy company?
Oh, it is super important. It's absolutely almost essential right now to get the partners, right. And you know, I think we learned this the wrong way by trying to build a lot of the things that were already available in the market by themselves. But as you think about digital, so digital is fundamentally a transformation journey, and digital is a big component of it. But it's, you know, using some of the big technology vectors that have developed over the last 5 or 10 years, a lot more like artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud computing, IoT, sensorization, you know, the prevalence of sensors everywhere. These are big technology vectors that can deliver significant amount of values, but fundamentally they're just enablers. And until you figure out a way to go and talk to somebody on an operator panel to tell them how they're going to do the job safer, more efficiently, more reliably, it's just toys in boxes. And this is where partnership comes in play. So people like Abhik and BCG and management consultancy firm that can do the business process re-engineering to come with it is just another aspect of that strategic partnerships and relationships that enables the full recipe of success. And even more closer to the actual transaction itself, just digital has enabled a lot of innovative commercial models, even in Baker Hughes. So we today do a lot of things by the drink, as opposed to just you have to buy an asset. So, you know, BOPs, blow up preventers that we used to sell, nobody in the world could ever even imagine renting them. They're now being rented because nobody wants to pay for that asset anymore. They want to pay for the use of that asset. So having digital and transferring the risk, you know, so risk, instead of risk being implied, risk being calculated and understood at the right party of the transaction, it really enables some very interesting strategic conversations with our customers. So a lot of our agreements today are actually including a bonus incentive or a penalty of lack of delivery. And I'm sure that, you know, BCG and KT will have many examples of that expectation from the market today. Because that's what digital enables. It enables us to have outcome-based conversation as opposed to transactional business.
Great, thank you. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about Korea specifically, and I'd like to turn it back over to Dr. Bae at KT. My question to you is, how do you think Korea is uniquely positioned to embrace the digital transformation?
That's a good question. As I mentioned, Korea has an advantage since Korea has many good companies in manufacturing, heavy industry, car, and IT. And I think it's hard to name any industry missing good company in Korea. So digital transformation needs every kind of information, and every transaction and every process should be digitalized. And I can see that the large companies like Samsung, Hyundai, and SK, KT, LG,
they are really into that digital transformation, and they are really focusing on like collecting all the data and installing the sensors in every factory. So all the data are already being collected. So as soon as these raw data are collected, and also Korea's many IT companies like Naver, Kakao, KT, SK has a lot of AI teams working on data analysis and AI massively. So Korea has all the cycle, the information gathering, digitalization, and then processing the data. And also it has all the service companies that interested in using those data, like shopping and game and even content companies. So Korea has really good infrastructure and framework and culture all together and suit for digital transformation. And I'm very excited to see the changes, and also it's great to be involved in those technical evolution.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, Korea has a very interesting ecosystem in terms of digital and a lot of the other industries. I'd like to maybe ask you a little bit more along those lines for the next question, Dr. Bae. And that is, in order to accelerate your company's digital transformation in energy, what kind of partnerships is KT looking for in the energy industry?
Yeah, since KT doesn't have a manufacturing industry, so KT is looking for partnership with manufacturing such as Samsung and Hyundai and LG, and also KT has the telecommunication and media experts. So next to mobile is kind of a vehicle and autonomous driving cars. So KT see that the car makers, the Hyundai or even Apple or even some good German companies. So KT is looking for collaborations with car companies, and in terms of energy as well. So since the electric vehicle is getting popular also in Korea, but charging and trading and looking for where to park, those things need the city level infrastructure and frame platform. So KT is interested in total smart cities solution and framework. So I think car companies are one of the partnership that KT is looking for. And also KT is actually interested in to increase the ecosystem of AI itself. So not only energy, so any collaboration is very welcomed in KT, and KT is actually into increasing the level of collaboration.
Thank you very much. Now I think we've talked a lot about the good things in digital and the Korean ecosystem. Maybe we'll spend a little bit of time to talk about the challenges. And for this, Abhik, I'd like to ask you the question of, if we look at Asia Pacific, what are the challenges to deploying digital in the energy sector for this region?
Sure. So I would say there are four big reasons why we stumble in the traditional space. If I would say, it would be just wrong to say that the same problem is with energy. It is also similar to what I see with a lot of my mining, metal, steel, cement business clients as well. Number one is digital as a topic. At least my realization of serving a lot of clients now is it suffers from insufficient value focus. And what that means is it is not really, the digital strategy is not aligned to the business strategy. In most cases, the digital strategy is still an IT strategy. It's like just replace the word IT with digital, and that's what you get dished out. But it is not about fundamentally changing ways of work, ways of safety, ways of applying analytics. I mean, the elements that Ahmed talked about, if you were to apply those analytics into business, it means changing the way an engineer or an operator works on the ground. That's a deep-rooted philosophical change of how, what I would say, you are adding smarts to wise, whilst the age-old engineer or the operator still thinks that how could a data model be smarter than the 35 years of experience that I have? It is my asset, it is my hard-earned blood. You cannot replace that over time. So I think there is a soft point of how structurally digital is embedded into it. Secondly, most companies today in Asia Pacific have around 40 plus initiatives running on digital from a company way. It is far too much. You cannot give that kind of focus on that. At best, we have seen the leaders focus on a high single digit or anywhere between 9 to 15 initiatives, and they do it well because that's a level of what I would say tracking. Number three is the entire tech part and the scalability in the longer term becomes a problem. Elements like security, architecture are in most cases an afterthought, almost in the second or the third month, wherein when you are about to sign off a contract and then you see that, oh gosh, I forgot elements X, Y, and Z. So I know those are technical components, but those a little bit of that recipe is very much needed to at least have a clear line of sight for the future, because you are balancing pace, outcome, and cost, which are very three different elements, but they need to be in the right proportion. And lastly, but fundamentally, if I would say, if I were to put my finger on one reason that would make digital a success or a failure, is the fact that is digital in your company driven by your center, driven by your function, or driven by your asset? The digital leaders have driven digital from the asset. It is driven in the BU, led by the BU, by the asset, funded, sponsored, grown there. That has been, every company has their unique way of going about it, but the percentage chance of success just multiply if it is asset backed and asset sponsored.
Great. Yes, thank you so much for your insights, Abhik. Some of those resonated with me as well, as I thought back to some of the conversations I've had locally with Korean companies regarding digital. And I think for the last question, I'd like to bring it back to Ahmed. And my question to you is, what is one thing you'd like to share with companies in energy that are interested in digital transformation but don't know where to start?
I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, Susan, but I would say pick your partners wisely, because, I mean, these are not traditional conventional transactions where you kind of buy something and it shows up in your warehouse 6 months later. That's not what we're talking about here. This is typically a very long-term partnership, and it's and there's a lot of, you know, pits and falls that come through through that journey. And you need to be ready to be in it for the long haul. But the fundamental piece from a guiding principle is this idea of value that Abhik was talking about. Is companies that have been very successful at this are companies that have translated their overall strategy to use cases, and that's very tricky. And you typically rely on some management consultancy firms like Abhik's to come and help you really boil your business down to its absolute essence, figure out where the value levers are, and then translate that strategy into actual digital use cases. And that piece, I think a lot of people want to rush through it because they want to see a toy, they want to see an algorithm that can predict the future. And I feel that that's sexy and everybody's excited about that. But the reality is the only time where you actually have an impact on your balance sheet or your income statement happens when the use case delivers value that has a linear transfer function back to your overall business strategy.
Yes, indeed. And so with that, I'd like to conclude our prepared session today. Thank you again very much to all of the panelists for their time this afternoon. And thank you to all of the members who have joined. I hope it was also an insightful session to you. And I hope that we also might be able to have our next Energy and Environment meeting in person. And with that, I'd like to wish you a good rest of the afternoon, and thank you again.
Thanks for the great moderation, Susan. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, AMCHAM, for the opportunity.